Hello and welcome to this series of tutorials for Microsoft Word and academic writing. If it so happens you don't use Microsoft Word, I'm sure you'll be able to apply some of these same ideas to your own word processor. Have a look at the help menu and see if you can find the same terminology and apply that. The idea behind this is we probably spent quite a bit of time in your research training in terms of writing text and talking about ideas like literature reviews, methodology, presentation of data, etc. But in this series I just want to look at our primary tool, our modern pencil, if you like, for managing the docs and managing the words. And I think, as you'll find, managing a larger dissertation or a larger research paper is a little bit more difficult than writing a short essay or a letter. I'm not going to look at all the instructions and all the tools for using the word processor, but I want to relate this just specifically to the kinds of things that are useful in a dissertation or an academic paper. And these items are also related to some experience with students asking questions, but in particular the sorts of problems that students might get into much later in the piece where they're near to completing and submitting a dissertation, and in a large document they might find it difficult to manage. So the idea behind these tutorials is basically spend some time with the word processor, use the manual, use these videos, and get on top of it to the degree that you need to in terms of what I'm talking about, and be comfortable with it. And I hope you'll find that as we move through this series, it's much easier to manage the document, firstly, but in the second part you might also see that actually it's a great aid to the way you think about the writing and the way you can think about the top level management of your logic, your ideas and your orders. First things first, what we're using here is Microsoft Word 2011 for Macintosh. If you have slight differences on your version or your computer platform, you'll still find that the various help menus will have many of the same features. As you can see, we'll open a new document. This would be the same as create new document, Command N. And there's several layers of help already built in for you. One is simply by the mouse over. So if I hover over any of the icons or pieces of text, it will tell you exactly what those tools do. Second thing is the help menu itself, and you can use that to search for specific terms, just specific items as they might arise. So I suggest you spend a little bit of time with that, get used to using it if you get stuck. And the third item I want to point out is getting started with Word, and maybe you can set aside some time one weekend or one evening and have a look at that. It's web-based, but it's a nice starting point just to work through and familiarise yourself with the kinds of things that are available to you. Okay? So let's take some of these specific things in order in terms of academic writing generally. First of all, when you create the new document that we're looking at, you may have slight differences on the tools that are available and how it's set up depending on what your defaults are on your system. So there's a couple of things I'd like you to do. Go to the View menu and we make sure the ribbon is turned on. So now we can see we have fonts and formatting and all sorts of nice little tools to format our text. The second thing I'd like you to do is go to View Toolbars, and at the moment we're looking at a standard toolbar. We also want to enable formatting. Now we've got this whole range of options up the top here, and it'll give you a lot of control over the program, but we'll also just use some specific elements of that. Again, if you're unsure what items might do, you hover over them and Word will give you a little menu that tells you what it's about. If you're still unsure, you can look up that item in the help menu. The next item I'd like to draw your attention to is the use of templates. Templates are going to save you a lot of time. Right now we're just going to look at making a basic template so we don't have to keep playing with the obvious settings, But a little bit further, we'll also look at making a template for your dissertation so that it remembers all the important things. In this case, we're just going to make a basic document. Let's say I don't like that font and I want to use Times New Roman, because that's very common in academic writing. It's probably familiar to in many of the papers you've read. We might make it 11 point if I like that. Another thing is that what we're looking at is a draft view. So you can see Word documents in all sorts of views. I want to put it in a print layout view. So now we can see a virtual page like it appears at the printer. That's quite nice. We get an idea of our margins and how our text looks on the page, how our page feeds looks, those kinds of things. Speaking of pages, I also want to set the margins for this page and how it prints. So we go to the Format menu, go to Document, and now we'll set our margins according to some common standards in academic writing and some other good reasons for it later, as we'll see in relation to dissertations. Let's make that 2 centimetres top and bottom of the page, 3 left and right, which is a generous margin, headers and footers, 1 and 2, that's the space you can put footnotes in or page numbers, etc. And we'll just check our page setup. That's important too. The Australian format for printers is mostly A4. So I'll make sure that's set to A4 and we're good to go. So there's a basic format for a document. It's got the fonts I like, the page margins I like, and now what I could do is save that as not a document, but a template, a .dot, and when that happens it will put it in a special place for you called My Templates. I've already made one of those, so let's have a look at that. We'll close this document, and now we'll say new, not new blank document, but new from template. And that gives me a whole lot of templates they've created, which you may be able to use elsewhere. But in this case, we want to look at the one called My Templates. And there's 2 I've created, and this one is the one we've just talked about, My New Document 1. So choose that, and that means every time you want to start this document in this way, it's there. You don't have to do anything else. All the margins are set. Page size is set. So, continuing that analogy, let's do a little more specific work on setting up something for a dissertation. Now, this is not just about the way it looks, although indeed you'll see that's exactly what it is, but it's also about the idea of we're encoding it with metadata, data that you actually can't see in the words, but it's smart data, like when you open up an iTunes song and see all the lyrics or the songwriters or information about it inside. What we're really doing is encoding metadata into Microsoft Word and making it smart for us, and we'll see how to use some of those smart tools as we go along. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is just change our template a little bit. We'll go back to the document. This is something to bear in mind. Much later in the piece, when you go to submit your final dissertation, and perhaps have to submit it again after reviews, there'll be at least 1, if not more, hard copies involved, and they're bound down the left-hand side. So right here, we can do that now, so that later on we don't have to worry about our page breaks and how our text now looks real strange because we need space for the gutter to be able to do the binding. So now we've got a little bit of extra space down the left-hand side. There's some other things I'd like to do now in terms of creating the dissertation and working with it. Rather than work through that longhand on the page, I've created one that's part of the way there. So we'll just close this and I'll open this one. So I've got a few bits and pieces written down the page, as you can see. That's just a basic overview of perhaps what your dissertation might look like in terms of the structure. There's something on the first page with the title. We'll have what we use in the academic standards for dissertations as a section called the Preliminaries. They're before the dissertation proper, and that's where we have things like the abstract, table of contents, etc. That usually has a different numbering system as well, where we use small Roman numerals. And then at the beginning of the dissertation proper, we start the page numbering again, so that the first page of chapter 1 is page 1 in regular numerals. So that particular structure involves the use of page breaks and section breaks. We're going to look at that in a minute. But it also involves the use of heading styles to define what these markers are, to give them smart meta tagging. We'll do that first. So rather than just make that bold and change the font size and play with it manually, there's another menu up here called the Style menu. Okay? So what we do here is we apply styles to each of those sections. You can see it's a very long list. We'll make the first of these a title, and we'll look at our heading styles here and call that, let's see if we can find something that looks like title. Okay, there's a title. So, this is going to happen a lot. I don't like the look of that. I don't want to play with it manually, but I'd like to program this or put metadata into it. So we've selected title. Here it is on the page, and what we'll do is go to Format, Style, and we'll change that. Modify title, and basically we can just select any combination of fonts and spacing we like. So I'm going to make that something much simpler. Arial, bold, centered, quite a bit smaller than that, I think. Maybe 18 point, it's on the cover page. Then we go to paragraph, make the spacing after it just a little bit. Okay, and the other thing is it's got this borderline under it, so I think from memory that's located in borders, and we'll just make those none. Okay, so now what's happened is it's remembered all that, and I've changed the title heading style. As we move through, we can apply that to different headings. Okay, we have top level headings, and then within chapters you might have lesser headings. I think it'd be fair to say a lot of these things, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 pretty much covers your dissertation structure or your paper structure as you move through it. So I'll just move down to here and we'll call that heading 1. Let's find it. Okay, we don't like that. We'll go do the same process again. Format, Style, Modify. I'll make it Arial, left aligned. I want it black. Make it a bit smaller than that. 12 point. Have a look at our paragraph spacing. Get rid of all that space on top of it. And put a little bit of space underneath. And so on, you can move through the headings. One of the things about it that's immediately useful is once you've defined one of those, I can go to the second one and just type in heading 1, and it remembers that. And as you move through the dissertation, you can create styles for all sorts of things like headings, footnotes, quotations, reference lists, and just apply them. So that's quite a lot of power up your sleeve, obviously just to format things in a larger document, but it also has other smarts we'll see as we go along. Okay, just skip ahead a little, and I've marked all those with various heading styles, as you can see. Heading 1, at chapters, and next subheading, and next subheading. So we'll return to that in a minute and see some of the ways we might be able to use that. But right now I'm just going to use this landscape to turn to the other feature that's very helpful for dissertations. And that's the idea of section breaks. Section breaks are quite different to page breaks. Quite often we see students using page breaks to manually insert spaces between chapters and so forth, but in fact page breaks have no smart content, no meta tagging, if you like, no meta features. Section breaks, on the other hand, are very smart and allow you to control the format of the dissertation much like the way a book would be broken up and sectioned. Here's one of the uses. As I said before, we have a title page, which is really quite different to the preliminaries, which come after it, which is quite different again to the body of the work and then its final pieces. So in fact, we almost have three sections there. One, the preliminaries, the chapters, and possibly a fourth section with the end. One of the accepted formats for the submission of dissertations is that the preliminaries are quite different to the rest of the piece, and they're numbered differently, and they use different Roman numerals, small Roman numerals. When we get past that section to chapter 1, then we start the pages again as a new chapter. Plus we can use some other indicative information along the way. So this is where using page breaks and section breaks separately can give you quite a lot of control over the document, particularly when it becomes larger, and particularly in mind of your audience, which in the first case is the assessors. So what we'll do is insert breaks through this. Between the title page and the preliminaries, we'll insert a section break. That means the title page is completely independent. Okay, section break. And we can see it flips over the page. So the next thing to note is we can see it moving around, but we haven't got a lot of indication of exactly what's being done where. And one of the very good tools to use in Microsoft Word or in other word processors is this standard backwards looking P symbol. Show all non-printing characters. We'll turn that on. Now we can see returns and line feeds. We can see our section break and where it is on the page, what it is, if it's a page break or a section break. And so while we're setting this up, we'll keep these non-printing characters turned on so we can see what we're doing. So section break, and then I'm going to insert another section break after the preliminaries. Makes that independent. Okay. Then we've got our chapters and our references, and we'll come back to those in a minute. So at the front here, let's just have a look at our independents. At the bottom and the top of each page, we have a header and a footer. Remember, in the document we set up header and footers. Okay. To find that, hover your mouse and you can see that little header plus page image come up, and double click, and that will put you in the header editor. At the bottom of the page there's a footer, and this tells you some important information about managing the document. First of all, we can see that indeed this first page is called section 1, and then this next page is called section 2. That could be the difference between chapters, it could be the difference between the preliminaries and the first chapter. We can see there's two different sections here because we've used a section break. That also means we have independence and control over our formatting, quite unlike a page break. So let's have a look at that. See the ribbon here? That tab, header and footer. We can see automatically it's linked to the previous section. So if we want independence, we'll turn that off, and the same for the bottom. If we want independence, we'll turn that off. Okay, then when we get to the next section, section 3, we're now got a different part of the dissertation, the chapters, and we'll turn that off as well. Okay, so now we have independence between each of these section breaks we've created. What we'll do then is we'll insert some page breaks between each of these preliminaries, because that's how they're expected to be seen. You may have more than these, you might have a table of figures and some other things, but I'll just insert now page breaks, and the reason for that is I want the same page numbering throughout, and our non-printing characters makes it very clear what we've got, what's on the page, and exactly what we're doing while we're setting this up. Okay. So, title page, we don't want any page numbers, you just want all the information about your project here. But on the first page of the preliminaries, after the title page, we then want our pagination. So we know we've made that independent. Okay, so now we say insert page number, and we have special page numbers on the front. Let's say we make it right. We want to use small Roman numerals, and we want to start at page 1. Okay, now we'll have our little Roman numerals throughout the preliminary, as you can see, all the way through until we get to the first chapter, in which case now we'll start our page numbering again, and we'll insert page number, format, start at 1 and make it regular numbering, and then that will continue throughout the dissertation. So we could keep going with this, but what I'll do now is I'll open one I've created earlier and put that aside. Again, made that a template, and I'll make that available if you'd like a copy. My dissertation, and it's got all of those things inside of it. We turn the non-formatting characters on. We can see that's a very similar structure, except I've expanded it a bit, and now we have section breaks between chapters and reference lists and so forth. So let's just have a look at that. Here we go through the opening section, and we get to the first chapter. Okay. Here's our heading styles, as we've seen before. We've also made our body of text a normal style. That's what they call just for the main writing, and also checked that we're happy with that normal style in the same way by the style editor. Set it up the way you want it, and then that's all the way that your main body of text looks. Okay, but a couple other things about the use of section breaks. Following the preliminaries and the ending of the small Roman numerals, we now not only start the page again, there's a couple little things here that people like to do for examiners that are very helpful. On the top of each page, in the heading, because we have control of the sections, now I'll start using my name and dissertation title. That's a nice idea as you're moving around the theses or the dissertation marking, and remember that that examiner might have quite a lot of other work to look at. So we've always got this identification for you and the title of your piece. And at the bottom of the piece, remember, he or she has hard copy, and so as they flick through the dissertation and as they're trying to look around it and check cross-references and check what you've said, what we have in the bottom right-hand corner is the name of the chapter, its title, and a page number, which is very convenient and makes it as easy as possible for them. You may come up with other variations, but this one uses name and dissertation at the top, chapter title and page number at the bottom, and basically that's made possible through the different use of headings and footers. As we move to the end of the piece, you can see the same thing can happen throughout with appendices, attachments, CD recordings, all those kinds of things. You can label it and identify it and section break it independently. Let's just go back for a minute to the idea of making heading styles now that we've split it up. One of the elements of heading styles we'll see that's very powerful is now Word has marked various sections through the document and across potentially many words. So it's smart, it knows where things are. So later in the dissertation, when you come to do your table of contents or list of figures or any other kind of referencing like that, what you don't want to have to do is try and do it manually and to try and find all the page numbers and type in little dots and try and make it look like a professional table of contents. And every time you change the dissertation, if the page numbers changes, it won't remember that, so you'll have to do it again. So what we use here is a feature called Insert, Index and Tables. And the reason this works is because those heading styles have been made. You can see we have a variety of tools here, but we're going to use Table of Contents, just the standard one. We're going to ask it to show 3 levels because we created heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. And we'll just say OK. And now what it's done is it's given us a perfect table of contents. It's indented things nicely according to heading styles. It's given us page numbers. All of those page numbers are live and will update, and furthermore, if you click on them, it will take you straight to that point in the dissertation. So it's also very good for general navigation. You can delete that and make a new one at any time, but there's one big feature of using heading styles. The last thing I'd like to touch on, and this can be part of your styles as well, but I've observed students trying to make reference lists look like what they see in professional documents or academic documents, and quite often, again, they try and do this manually by putting spaces between the lines and all that kind of stuff. And basically it falls apart very easily, and it can be a bit of a pain to tweak and fiddle with. So the same thing, there's a very easy tool for that. What references generally use, and that you're probably looking for, is what's called a hanging indent. Okay? This little bar across here does all sorts of things that I'm not going to go into too much detail in. Use the help menu, but that's where you get your different kinds of tabs, center tabs, page width, margins, all sorts of things. But this little tool here, this one down the bottom, if you drag just the lower half across, you get a hanging indent, which is exactly what the mouse over says, hanging indent. Okay? And so then what you have is something that looks pretty much like a reference list is meant to look, and all you have to do is drag that across and not be trying to create spaces and artificial line breaks. The next obvious step to that is create a style for it. So I'm going to select one I've made here earlier, and I called it references. Okay, same thing, you can set it up, edit it, say I want it to be a little bit smaller, what the font is, what the spacing is, and that hanging indent is right here in the formatting. I've called it 1/2 centimetre. And we can apply all that and keep it as a style. So let's say you typed in something a bit later, you inserted another one, and inserted another one, and maybe another one again, and the list starts growing. So all I have to really do is select those and type in my references style, hit select, and that's exactly what it's done. Okay. Another good use of styles. So I think that's some of the basic tips and tricks I wanted to point out in this part. There's only really 3 things there apart from generally finding way around. The use of heading styles, the use of page breaks versus section breaks, and generally a little bit of information about what a dissertation looks like in relation to page numbers and preliminaries and structure and so on. In part 2 of this tutorial series, I want to look at some more advanced use of Microsoft Word, but please don't let that advanced term scare you off. What I mean is these exact same tools, we can now begin to do some very advanced manipulation with a large document, and also we can begin to use this actually in terms of research thinking and the way we're writing. So I'll see you soon.